In the hush of 2 a.m., the suburb felt suspended between yesterday and tomorrow. Every porch light dimmed except the one glowing timidly over Silas McCrae's back door. Silas, 77, Vietnam vet, retired machinist, gruff in daylight but gentle in the dark, stepped onto the dewy grass clutching a rust-spotted lantern. Its circle of amber light skimmed the yard's uneven ground and landed on the impossible, a German shepherd lying in a crumpled heap by the lilac bushes. Ribs rose in ragged half-breaths, crimson soaked the dog's flank, and those honey-brown eyes flicked open, landing on Silas like a silent plea. A few feet away, his barn cat Clementine slept unfazed, paws tucked, tail twitching to some feline dream of fireflies. Silas knelt, knees cracking louder than cicadas, and murmured, "Easy now, soldier." The word felt right. The dog looked like every battered comrade he'd dragged out of jungle mud half a century back. He slid calloused fingers under the shepherd's jaw to feel a faint pulse, then pressed his forehead to the animal's, trading warmth, promising survival. Overhead, clouds bullied the moon, yet left one sliver of silver that lined the scene. Old man, dying dog, napping cat, like a photograph nobody would ever take. At that moment, Silas decided the night would not claim another life on his watch. He shrugged off his denim jacket, fashioned a makeshift tourniquet from a frayed belt, and stemmed the bleeding with the precision of a man who'd memorized field dressings long before smartphones existed. The dog trembled, but did not bite. Trust was its last expendable resource, and Silas honored it. As he worked, Clementine yawned, opened one amber eye, registered the drama as mildly inconvenient, and tucked her head back beneath her tail. Nothing else in the universe moved, not the stars, not the wind, only Silas's steady hands and the fragile thud of a heart refusing to surrender. Wind carried the faint rattle of aluminum trash cans from a neighbor's driveway, but Silas's focus tunneled into the rhythmic drip of blood pattering the grass like raindrops out of season. He scanned the shepherd's injuries, a deep gash along the flank, likely barbed wire or a passing car, and an ugly puncture near the shoulder where bone felt mushy. Years ago, he'd have called a buddy at the firehouse, but now his contact list was mostly ghosts. Still, there was Doc Ramirez, the kindly night shift vet whose number he kept magneted to the fridge beneath a photograph of his late wife, June. Silas fumbled for his flip phone, thumbs slow but decisive, and dialed. 3 rings, a sleepy "Wennel?" Then Silas's gravel voice. "Got a big shepherd bleeding out in my yard. Need you, Doc." No further persuasion required. Ramirez had served with Silas in disaster relief after Hurricane Katrina. Honor among washed-up heroes runs deep. Hanging up, Silas returned to the dog, whispering a steady cadence, letting the animal match its ragged breaths to the rhythm of his speech. "Stay with me. June used to say every sunrise is a receipt for faith. Let's cash in, huh?" The shepherd's eyelids fluttered, as though recognizing the promise. Meanwhile, Clementine executed a luxurious stretch, padded over, and planted herself against Silas's thigh, radiating feline nonchalance that somehow steadied his nerves. The cat's purr began, low and industrial, vibrating through denim into arthritic bones, and in that unlikely feedback loop, cat to man to dog, hope traveled like a quiet current. A distant siren wailed, faded, probably a mile away, but to Silas it felt like a ticking clock. He adjusted the belt tourniquet, tore a strip from his flannel shirt, and pressed it firmly to the wound. The yard smelled of iron, lilacs, and the stubborn resolve of a man who refused to let the night decide the ending. Minutes tumbled into 30, then 45. Time became elastic, stretching around the fragile breath of the shepherd. Silas's lantern sputtered, wick begging for oil, yet he didn't dare fetch supplies. Instead, he reached for memory, conjuring June in her rose-patterned bathrobe, saying, "Love is just a tension that never clocks out."
He lavished that attention now on every twitch of the dog's paw. And the cat, guardian of ordinary miracles, kept its post. At last, headlights split the alley, scattering raccoons and drenching the yard in harsh white. Doc Ramirez hopped from his pickup, medkit swinging. He evaluated the scene with brisk competence, praising Silas's impromptu fieldwork. Together they loaded the dog onto a makeshift sled, a flattened cardboard TV box Silas had saved just in case, and slid him toward the tailgate. The shepherd whimpered once, collapsed into a shivering stillness that stole Silas's breath. Ramirez injected a painkiller, checked pupils, and leaned close. "He's on the edge, amigo. You ride with me?" Silas nodded, but Clementine stepped in front of his boots like a living ankle bracelet, eyes glimmering accusation. "Who'll guard the yard?" Silas glanced at the dark windows of his house, the silhouette of June's empty rocking chair on the porch. "I'll come back," he promised the cat, though perhaps he spoke to ghosts too. Ramirez's truck roared to life, gravel spat. Silas climbed in, cradling the shepherd's massive head, feeling warm drool soak into his palm. Streetlights whipped past like spaced-out heartbeats until the town receded and the veterinary clinic's neon paw print appeared, a tiny lighthouse for lost causes. As they burst through the doors, orderlies met them with a gurney. Silas followed until hospital smell, disinfectant, iodine, quiet dread, stopped him cold. He was back in '69, triage tents, men calling for mothers. He shook it off. Different war, he muttered. But the stakes felt identical. Keep this soul breathing until dawn.
In the waiting room, vinyl chairs and a vending machine buzzing like a mosquito composed Silas's kingdom of worry. Ramirez disappeared behind double doors, leaving silence that tasted metallic, old adrenaline drying on skin. Silas's thoughts spiraled. How long had the dog suffered before stumbling into his yard? Did some family mourn its absence? He entertained scenarios, children taping missing flyers to lampposts, a lonely backyard bowl untouched. Guilt gnawed. Was he a savior or a thief of last chances? He pulled out June's photograph, edges worn, eyes kind. "Guide me," he whispered, as though the dead could dispatch wisdom via cheap Kodak paper. Minutes later, Ramirez re-emerged, mask dangling, scrubs blood-spattered. "Stitched the flank, splinted the shoulder, transfusion started," he reported. "Next hour is coin flip." Silas exhaled a breath he didn't know he held, nodding. He remembered flipping coins in Saigon bars, promising fate a drink if it let them see morning. Fate had a tab still open. To distract himself, he texted the only neighbor awake at odd hours, a college kid named Marley, asking to check on Clementine. A thumbs-up emoji came back. Silas squinted at the tiny cartoon, baffled but reassured. Then the overhead TV flickered to late-night news. Wildfire footage, oceans warming, politics snarling. Silas muted it mentally. Tonight the world had shrunk to one operating table, one dog, one dwindling coin spinning on its rim. He whispered the serenity prayer, but swapped nouns. "Grant the dog courage, grant Ramirez wisdom, grant me patience." Somewhere in sterile corridors, machines beeped like distant artillery. He closed his eyes and pictured his backyard, moonlight silvering the cat's fur, lilac shadows emanating calm, a lantern waiting to be relit. He vowed if the shepherd lived, that yard would become sanctuary. Fresh straw bed, water bowls changed twice a day, belly rubs on demand. Deals with the universe feel binding at 4 a.m.
The hour passed crawling, but the dog clung to life with a grit Silas recognized. Soldiers who'd refused morphine just to keep talking, marathoners finishing on ruined knees, June delivering their stillborn first child, yet choosing to love again. Ramirez finally signaled thumbs up, surgery a success. Internal bleeding minimal, lungs clear. The dog would need days of monitoring, but the worst was past. Silas's shoulders sagged under the sudden permission to rest. He thanked Ramirez with a clasped forearm, their generation's handshake of brotherhood, then paid the deposit without flinching. Money, he figured, was war pension turned into mercy coupons. Outside, dawn nibbled at the horizon. Silas phoned Marley, learned Clementine had commandeered his recliner and demanded tuna. Crisis averted. Relief laughed out of him, raspy and surprised. He shuffled back inside for final instructions, med schedule, suture care, follow-up dates. A tech asked the dog's name for records. Silas paused. Naming a creature makes you responsible for its story. He remembered June's favorite hymn, Bright Morning Star, and said, "Call him Bright." The tech smiled indulgently, typed it in. Bright, he mused, a contradiction for a dog found in darkness, but maybe prophecy too. Paperwork done, Silas approached the recovery cage. Bright lay bandaged, muzzle gray with age, IV drip casting a blue glow on fur. Silas reached through bars. Bright weakly licked his knuckles. That tiny gesture detonated something in Silas's chest. Grief for every living thing he'd failed to save, gratitude for the ones he still could. He whispered, "Rest easy, Bright. Home's waiting." The clinic smelled less like war now, more like possibility. Silas slipped away, leaving a deposit of hope in the stainless steel quiet.
Back at the house, sun blazed the porch in molten gold. Clementine greeted him with theatrical indifference, tail flicking like a metronome of judgment. Silas scooped her up, ignoring protests, and buried his face in her fur. "He made it, Clem. We pulled him back." She meowed, translating to "feed me first, philosophize later." Inside, Silas fixed coffee, spooned tuna, and opened windows to let fresh morning dilute the memory of blood. The backyard looked ordinary again. Dew-slick grass, lilac petals scattered like confetti from a victory parade nobody witnessed. Yet the ordinary felt upgraded, as if the universe had secretly repainted each blade of grass in richer HDR. Silas noticed details he'd long ignored: the fence post leaning, the birdhouse missing its roof, the swing June used to sit on humming in the breeze. He scribbled a to-do list titled "For Bright," adding repairs that would turn the yard into a fortress of comfort. As he worked, Clementine supervised from a sunny patch, eyes narrowing whenever he hammered too loud. By noon, he erected a shade canopy, spread cedar shavings, and positioned an old quilt where Bright could watch squirrels. Each task stitched him tighter into the fabric of the present, a place he hadn't fully inhabited since June's passing. He pictured the dog's tentative steps on new grass, the first curious sniff of lilac, the inevitable moment when cat and dog negotiated coexistence through sniff diplomacy. Silas chuckled, a sound unused muscles had to remember how to craft. The day wore on, but tiredness felt noble, not hollow.
Evening returned with soft violet skies, and Silas drove back to the clinic, passenger seat blanketed, front yard porch light already left on like an arrow pointing home. Bright was cleared for discharge, antibiotics taped to his crate, cone of shame secured with Velcro dignity. The ride was slow, every pothole earned an apologetic grunt from Silas. He talked the whole way, filling Bright in on renovations, menu options, rice and boiled chicken, and house rules. Cats outrank dogs. Bright listened, ears flicking at familiar words: home, good, rest. Pulling into the driveway, Silas carried the shepherd, 80 pounds of fragile courage, through the gate. Clementine awaited on the quilt, as though presiding over ribbon cutting. She sniffed Bright's bandaged shoulder, issued a curt chirp, then circled twice and flopped beside him, confirming citizenship. Bright exhaled a sigh that trembled into sleep. The yard's tiki torches flickered on timer, bathing both animals in amber halos reminiscent of that first lantern glow. Silas sat on the steps, coffee mug swapped for chamomile tea, and let silence spread its wings. Fireflies blinked Morse code across the lawn. Somewhere, a radio played distant blues. He contemplated how narrowly life balanced. One random stumble left or right, and Bright would have bled out unseen. Rescue felt like rebellion against entropy, a loud yes hurled at the void's lurking no.
Days cascaded into a routine rich with small triumphs. Bright managing 3 steps without wobble. Clementine tolerating shared water bowls. Silas rediscovering the pleasure of sunrise walks. Each dawn they patrolled the perimeter, the dog sniffing, the cat sashaying, the old man leaning on a cane etched with unit insignia. Neighbors began waving. Children peered through fences, and someone slipped a handwritten thank you note into Silas's mailbox. Saw you help that dog, restored my faith. He pinned it to the fridge beside June's photo, as though she'd mailed it herself. Meanwhile, Bright's fur began to regrow around the surgical scars, forming jagged